Hello and welcome to News 9, and you are watching On Point with me. On Point 1, we tell you about a dangerously new escalation in the Middle East. Iran blocks Hormuz, will US attack next? On Point 2, we discuss China's growing footprint in the AI world because the New Year's event saw humanoids steal the show. Viewers, on Point 1, we talk about the global energy, and this global energy checkpoint has turned into the last front line in the ongoing Iran-US tensions. One narrow stretch of water is now holding the world hostage. Iran has moved to restrict navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, sending oil markets on edge and military planners into overdrive. This is no longer posturing. This is confrontation. Iran has taken the extraordinary step of temporarily blocking parts of the Strait of Hormuz, daring the United States to respond. Live fire drills, missile launches and naval maneuvers in one of the world's most sensitive waterways are not routine exercises. They are messages. Tehran is signaling defiance at a moment when tensions were already simmering. Washington calls it unsafe and provocative. Markets call it destabilizing. The world sees it for what it is: the most serious flashpoint yet in a long, volatile rivalry. Iran is tightening the choke point because pressure is tightening on Iran. Sanctions, military warnings, and renewed nuclear negotiations have boxed Tehran into a corner. Hormuz is Iran's ultimate pressure valve, a reminder that if it is denied economic lifeline, it can disrupt everyone else's. By briefly shutting the strait under the cover of maritime safety, Iran is testing red lines without crossing them yet. It is the coercive diplomacy being played out with missiles instead of diplomacy. The United States has significantly bolstered its military posture across West Asia amid escalating tensions, with Iran deploying a powerful mix of naval and air assets across key flashpoints. At the center of the buildup is the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group, currently operating in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Oman. The carrier is escorted by multiple guided missile destroyers, including USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., USS Michael Murphy, and USS Spruance, providing layered air and missile defense in the region. Additional US destroyers, USS McFall and USS Mitchell, have been positioned near the Strait of Hormuz, a critical maritime checkpoint, while USS Delbert D. Black is operating in Red Sea. Another destroyer, USS Pinckney, is deployed elsewhere within the CENTCOM area of responsibility. In the Persian Gulf, the US Navy has forward deployed littoral combat ships, USS Canberra, USS Tulsa, and USS Santa Barbara, focusing on patrol, surveillance, and rapid response operations. Further west, surface combatants USS Roosevelt and USS Bulkley are operating in the Mediterranean Sea, reinforcing US naval presence across multiple theaters. Meanwhile, the aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford is en route from Atlantic, signaling potential reinforcement if tensions escalate further. The air component of the buildup is equally robust. Advanced fighter jets, including F-15E Strike Eagles, F-16s, F-22 Raptors, and F-35 and F-35C stealth fighters, have been deployed to a key US air base in Jordan. Additional F-35s and F-A-18 fighter aircrafts are operating out of Al Udeid Air Base, the largest US military facility in the region. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrowest and most critical artery of the global energy system. Just a few kilometers wide at the shipping points, it funnels nearly 20 million barrels of oil gas every single day from Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. There is no real substitute for Hormuz. Pipelines exist, but they cannot absorb even half of the traffic. When the strait is threatened, the global economy feels it almost instantly. This is a global fault line. A prolonged disruption would spike fuel prices, drive inflation, hit supply chains, and raise the cost of living across continents. India, China, Japan, South Korea, all are deeply exposed. In an already fragile global economy, Hormuz is a trigger point. What begins as a regional standoff could rapidly become a worldwide economic shock. Washington has issued a blunt warning to Tehran. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called any attempt to block the Strait of Hormuz economic suicide, stressing that the United States retains multiple options to respond. Rubio has also urged China to step in, warning that a shutdown would hurt Asian economies for more than America's. For now, the U.S. Navy remains on deterrence footing, signaling resolve, not escalation as diplomacy continues, but with a clear message: freedom of navigation is non-negotiable. Now, viewers, let's tell you where the talks have reached. Indirect nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran concluded in Geneva yesterday with the cautious optimism. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called this session serious and constructive, saying both sides agreed on guiding principles to build future negotiations, that a path to agreement has begun, though it won't happen quickly. Iran plans to return in about 2 weeks with the detailed proposal. A U.S. official acknowledged some headway but noted many details still need to work, expecting Iran's next input to help close gaps. Vice President J.D. Vance described the outcome as mixed progress, yet Iran has not accepted the president's key red lines. President Trump believes a deal is possible but has warned of serious consequences if talks fail. Core differences over enrichment, missiles and sanction relief remain unresolved. We'll keep following the developments. Now on this issue, I'm joined by Ambassador D.P. Srivastava, former Indian Ambassador to Iran, and Professor Swaran Singh from the School of International Studies, JNU. I'll go to Ambassador Srivastava. Sir, is this just posturing or the American deployment is for real? Ambassador Srivastava.
I wouldn't like to speculate. President Trump has said that the preferred option is negotiations. Deployment of a fleet to be joined by a second aircraft carrier is perhaps part of the art of negotiations. But this is not really the way things should proceed, because it has led to increase in tension, and as part of the asymmetric response, Iran has conducted exercises in partially closing the Gulf, the Hormuz Strait for a few hours yesterday, just to demonstrate the consequences, which will not be limited to Iran, but will also affect other countries in the region, including American allies.
Professor Swaran Singh, do you think that America can do an aerial strike? Can they go in for a bombardment of Iranian cities?
I am lesser sure than I was, let's say, when last June strikes happened. This time, of course, talks continue, and yesterday, as you mentioned, they said there is a progress, at least in general principles, though issues remain still unresolved. And there is an anticipation of 2 weeks deadline that Iran now has to come back with the detailed proposals to, somewhere propitiate red lines of President Trump, which are no longer limited to simply ensuring Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. They have since expanded, now almost matching up to red lines that Israel has, which talks about no uranium enrichment, surrendering the uranium stockpiles, disentangling from proxies around the region, and so on. And therefore, what we see here is, yes, there is a certain progress in talks, but red lines still continue to be up in the face. And meanwhile, military posturing is actually increasing. So we already have, for example, one aircraft carrier of United States deployed off Oman, and a second one is supposed to be Gerald R. Ford, also approaching for deployment in the same region. But what is significant is reports that the IRGC naval drills that happened in Strait of Hormuz since Monday are now going to be joined by Russia and China, who are dispatching their naval forces. Chinese destroyers are on the move, and they are tomorrow going to hold trilateral exercises, possibly part of Maritime Security Belt 2026 that has been there since 2019. So, in that sense, the kind of military power posturing apparently is shifting, making lesser sure of the clear dominance of United States, particularly when, of course, Khamenei has also spoken rather strongly, saying that
Professor,
United
what is
States has
making America so aggressive on Iran? What is making them so aggressive on Iran?
what is making United States
Yes.
aggressive?
Yes. Why is the
Oh,
United States getting so aggressive with Iran right now?
That's true because that is how President Trump wants to find some, visible influence and decisive approach in some direction. Because apparently Ukraine negotiations are not leading anywhere. Jared Kushner and Witkoff are talking to Ukrainians and Russians as well in Switzerland, and therefore military deployments is a kind of posturing that President Trump apparently is doing to forcefully use that maximum pressure strategy. But apparently what is interesting is the response that Iran has, that talks about the response will be regional this time. Clearly they are saying our finger is on the trigger and so on. And Khomeini, as I was saying, has said today that Trump has admitted of having tried to dislodge the theocratic government in Iran since 1979, and they have failed, and they are going to fail again. So while the foreign minister Arakshi, as you mentioned, is taking the softer line, even the President Pezeshkian is saying Iran is open for inspections and so on. But Khomeini's tone and IRGC's exercises are, showcasing a very different stance. And if Russia and China are joining those naval exercises tomorrow, then I think that really would raise the anxiety at the regional level and make regional powers like Iraq and Oman and Saudi Arabia and everybody else who are this time trying to become more constructive in their approach, and Oman is leading, of course.
Or do you think that America has become very ambitious, Professor Singh, because the way they bombed Fordo and the response of the Iranians were limited in nature, it was followed by protests, and they feel that maybe the time has come, there is a domestic momentum in which the regime can be changed without putting foot on the ground? Or why else America would deploy so much of force? So much of force?
That is true. That is true that they are deploying almost potentially 1/3 of American Navy in the region, and that could actually raise tensions not just for Iran but also the entire region in that sense. But the ideal moment of protests being a kind of a context is gone now. Protests have virtually been subdued forcefully by now, and therefore that ideal moment when the regime was kind of perplexed and occupied with domestic unrest all over Iran at that time in almost all districts of Iran, that ideal moment is no longer there. I think the regime apparently feels back in control, and that is why the language of Khomeini is far more assertive. And in that sense, I think this is constantly going to ratchet up tensions in coming days and weeks in that sense. And I'm not too sure if Iran is going to come back with proposals within 2 weeks that will satisfy President Trump. Because as I said, Trump's deadlines are now no longer Trump's red lines. They're actually Israeli red lines, which are expanded red lines. And Iran will find it very difficult to propitiate that kind of demand.
Okay. Ambassador Srivastava, this is the question which I asked Professor Swaran Singh. Why is America getting so aggressive with Iran? I mean, to look at the deployment of forces in the Gulf and Mediterranean Sea and Jordan, it is unprecedented.
Well, it does not suit American interests to have a fight which is difficult to win. Let me just remind the viewers, in 2002, after Iraq war, President Bush Jr. had declared on board a U.S. aircraft carrier off San Francisco, mission accomplished. And the mission dragged on for another decade. There was more than $1 trillion cost to U.S. Treasury and at least 2,000 American casualties. And at the end of the day, the American oil companies had to leave Iraq, which has larger reserves perhaps than Iran. And the biggest gainer was China. So we have to bear in mind the lessons of history. I think what Professor Swaran Singh was hinting at, there's, I would tend to agree that this is not simply American agenda. There are other considerations behind it, and
Yes.
the cost in terms of political goodwill, in terms of economic interests, in terms of lives lost, will have to be borne by America. And of course, Iran.
Absolutely. He said expanded red lines of Israel. These are not only the American red lines, these are expanded red lines. Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens because
Let me add just one thing. You know, the most critical element here is the demand that Iran should give up the missiles. That is the only deterrence it has. And it has already declared that this is its part of sovereign right. So that is a deal breaker. If the discussions are confined to nuclear versus lifting of sanctions, a deal is possible. And I hope that we are moving towards, that the two sides are moving towards that direction.
Okay. Thank you both of you. Thank you both of you, gentlemen, for joining me on this conversation. But it's time for 1.2. We will discuss China's growing footprint in the air world because the New Year's event saw humanoids steal the show. As the world rings in the year of the fire horse, China chose spectacle over symbolism. At the annual CCTV Spring Festival Gala, the spotlight wasn't on celebrities but on machines. Now, dozens of humanoid robots took to the stage, blending traditional martial arts with cutting-edge robotics. Perfectly synchronized kicks, sword play, and nunchuck routines unfolded with mechanical precision designed to leave audience in awe. But beyond the choreography, this was a statement. China is clearly investing heavily in robotics and artificial intelligence, integrating culture with code, tradition with technology, yet the performance doesn't settle the larger question. It sharpens it because while China demonstrates what it is possible to do